We are tonight's entertainment.
They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
Oh, criminals in his town used to believe in things. Honor, respect. Look at you. What do you believe in, huh? What do you believe in?
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger. You wanna know how I got these scars? My father was a drinker and a fiend. And one night, he goes off crazier than usual. Mommy gets the kitchen knife to defend herself. Everything burns. Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Introduce a little for anarchy. Upset the established order till everything becomes chaos.
What's up? Good morning, Devil's Disciples. Or perhaps this is a Sunday, Black Mass, as we put out there.
Not too bad, all said and told. It's definitely a cold Sunday where I'm at.
Mysterious as ever. That's what I like about you. It's gonna be a more intimate talk to Andrew, Infernal, family, always out there, watching out for one another. That's what we do here. And I'm a Catwoman today with this shiny collar because we're gonna talk about occult influences in pop culture, movies, characters, heroes, comic book,
Villains.
music, villains, heroes, all that stuff. And this was Joker, um, fan made video, one of the most captivating dark characters in recent pop culture. Made even more famous, perhaps, by the dark legend that surrounds the years of age when he was working on a movie. So that ties back to something that we've mentioned here before, which is, Devil has got all the good music. And Lucifer is said to be the angel of music and the patron of fame and fortune, show business, people selling their souls for that. And somewhere there originates the modern folklore about the Soviet Chaotos.
I think you cut out that last little bit. What was that?
Club 28.
I think I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
Oh my, oh my. So let me introduce you. Um, Members of Club 28 are known to burn bright and die young. and they comes to collect his due. So, among others, I believe Jimi Hendrix died young of overdose, or who knows, maybe he was murdered by the Illuminati. Amy Winehouse, likewise, always remembered, genius singer, and Heath Ledger, the actor, was about to turn 28. And there's others. There's others. So the folklore. Some take the deal to burn bright and die young. Also, for the astrologers out there, you will know what happens at 28, right? Anybody knows? It's the Saturn full return. The full first return of Saturn takes exactly 28 years, and it's often thought of as the initiation into adult childhood. It's the real deal. It's the debt collector comes, basically. Saturnian themes.
Which that's interesting because according to many doctors today, your body and mind don't start fully maturing until the age of 28.
I remember what happened to me, and maybe some of you will as well. I got married at 27. It was a con, and I had an abortion the year I turned 28, and it was a major. Dude, that was a major event of like growing up because you take a life, and then what are you gonna do with yourself? Like now you live with that, and I believe it is a part of sexuality because I remember at 15 when I took the plunge. 15 is the age of legal consent where I come from. So I lost my virginity to my high school boyfriend, and I around that time, interestingly, I was experiencing bloodlust at the start of my sex life. So I might do an episode about vampirism before this show ends. And I remember back then, I'm like, oh my god, like, this is serious. Like, people can die of AIDS, for example. I was quite scared of it back then. Or you did consequence, which I was also afraid of. So you can give birth to a completely new life, or you can even die. I'm like, wow, like, starting to have sex is like really serious business. And then at 28, I went through it. Like I gave conception to a new life and then I took it away. So it was like the consummation of the powers of creation and uncreation, which are all of us. And I did have some minor health complications afterwards, but I was like hormonally fucked up because your body basically thinks that like you lost the baby and it's really doing a trip on you. So like I would be going through the city and I would feel like all I'm seeing is young fertile women and like nobody will want me. I wanted to dye my hair blonde to like I can totally get how women go crazy times from losing a baby because something happens to you that is like pretty visceral. So I went through it, and then I was left with this tremendous guilt. It was not regret, I never regretted it. It was the right decision. But I was left with the eight. Like, what are you gonna do now? How are you going to redeem this cost that you've paid? And I got the best advice randomly from one of the readers of my blog. I had kind of like an cult underground following, in my native tongue, writing like dark thriller, erotica memoirs of myself. And so I wrote about this experience too. And they said, look, and I'm not saying like housewife knitting, small crafts, like you get start creating something big because of this act of uncreation. And I'm like, wow, no, she's right. I can totally feel it. So I put out the intention out there in the universe, and in 1 week time, I met a formerly very famous photographer, and we lived together for 3 years. And I got very close to art for both good and bad. In the end, when I was leaving, I wanted to smash his head with an iron bar. A whole lot. I got him into all the galleries, and I got closer to art and also my sexuality, because he was a erotica, fine art, nude photographer, among other things. So that's what happened to me at 28. And I believe what happened to the famous artists must be some kind of, a different scenario for initiation. Tell us what you've been through. Timothy Foster says, it was intense as fuck. You're lucky if you make it 28. Well, they say that there is things a young man figures out before they are 21, or they will never turn 24. So some of those stupid choices. Timothy was sexually reckless. Yeah, that's a stupid. Even though, I believe nowadays that it all boils down to karma and curses. Because I contracted a venereal disease only once in my life, and it was from the most health conscious person ever, who was probably my only partner who was getting tested all the time. He just did not get tested for this pretty rare and usually innocent thing. So, you can plan your life to a certain degree, but when the Grim Reaper is out there to get you, he'll get you. If you're not meant to go just yet.
Whether you like it or not.
AIDS killed the disco. Yeah, oh my god. It was such a culture shock in the 80s, because people suddenly started connecting, fun and nightlife and sexuality with death in a way that they previously did not. And this gave rise, I believe, to non-contacts into foil and latex. That's what the old guard says, this all came as a response to AIDS. Like this fear that permeated the culture. Fear of exchanging body fluids. It was never the same again. When you see the videos, people dancing, 70s, wearing hot pants, it's like the age of innocence. Like, our sexuality was not connected with something sinister just yet. And Aleister Crowley, in his memoir, he went out of his way to prevent himself from catching STDs.
Well, Crowley was just Crowley.
Yeah.
Let's. Yeah, I'm sort of taking off what Brandon said. The Christians started the whole being naked is shameful, took away bathhouses, started plagues. Yeah, I honestly think that this whole sex is bad because you could get STDs, which, you should be cautious to a certain extent, is just like the next modern logical step for that ancient puritanical view where, anything that gratifies the body is in some way wrong.
So the genius disease refers to the story of Friedrich Nietzsche, the famous philosopher and madman who had syphilis. Also, Smetana, the great Czech. So there's something to be said about sexuality, madness, death, and genius. It's all about the Kundalini.
Well, I can speak from personal experience, having taken care of a couple of individuals with syphilis, that probably the reason these geniuses are considered geniuses, genius disease, is it erodes your ability to recognize inhibitions. So any warning light in your mind that says we shouldn't be thinking this, eventually syphilis will be like, no, go ahead, think it, throw it out there, it's fine.
Yeah, man, it's Crowley treated disease as a club of pride and an experience to be that kind of a man, for sure. I believe that marrying virgins actually does not. I mean, you can rationalize it away all you want, like, contraception or diseases and such, but it really had a spiritual significance. It was a cult thing. Something happens when you start communing sexually with other people. I mean, which, when I was 15. So something happens that changes you forever. And it's interesting, how as teenagers we are so fascinated by like blood and gore. Like, I remember all of us would be like into reading fantasy novels, but you know what we would read in those fantasy novels? Like cherry picking sex scenes, and there's just something about these two things that comes to surface, and it has something to do with the transition from innocence, from childhood into that childbearing age where you're technically able to conceive.
I think part of it is during that age, your body's almost geared to seek out experience that you were somewhat protected from by your parents. Basically, you get these experiences now, so should they become irrelevant and you need to draw on that experience later, you have it. Like, ooh, blood and gore, so I know how to handle when I see gore later. That kind of thing.
Coming back to Club 28. Heath Ledger. So you're more familiar than I am with certain aspects of like entertainment and the arts. I had to look up method acting, which is what you personally think could have led to his premature demise. The official cause of death was stated to be overdose. I mean, they found traces of everything in his body, in his blood, all the prescribed ones. It was a freaking cocktail. So what's your take on this? What killed Heath Ledger, who famously played Joker?
See, yeah, the drugs did kill him, but the drugs are like a smoking gun. Until you have a hand that pulls the trigger, it's not going to kill you. What actually killed him was method acting the Joker, because thing about method acting, at least as far as I understand it, is from when you start a production to when you end a production, you're never not your character. You can be more like yourself, you can be less like yourself, but you're never not the character until the last day of the production. And to do that, some people, like, they go into like this isolation state where they just saturate their environment and their reactions to the world in how the character would. Famously, Heath Ledger actually locked himself up, I think it was for 2 months, in a hotel room. And there's a notorious notebook that probably not will ever see the light of day of his process of becoming the Joker and his thoughts as the Joker about the world around him.
Wow, so you believe that he basically underwent uh like a full immersion experience into the character.
Yeah, he did a full immersion into the Joker.
And he
And
became the hero.
yeah, like, even other people have played the Joker, but not to that extent, say it warps you a little bit after.
You
Even if
don't
you're
come
not
out with
method
this.
acting, it will warp you a little bit, and you have to watch out. Well, then method acting's the worst because you are that character until the last day of the production. So the role didn't kill him. His way of attaining that character for the production is what killed him.
There's more stories like this, I believe, when actors basically broke down, um, especially working with certain directors. I believe the lady who played the lead female role in The Shining with Stanley Kubrick, she looks insane there because the director basically drove her
Yeah.
insane.
There was
He had
once.
her reshoot herself with the baseball bat 100 times in a row,
Mm-hmm.
60 times, something like that. So when you see her there losing her freaking mind, that's actually where she's at.
Another one that I found out a while ago is apparently not too many years ago, Jim Carrey starred in a movie where he was playing, what was it, Kafka? And even he himself said, there was a point at
Oh
which I
god,
didn't
Kafka
know.
the Jew.
Yes. Even Jim Carrey himself said there was a point where I couldn't tell where Kafka ended and I began.
I have heard this very sentence recently from a witch, so that's pretty scary that you bring it up. She said, when the ancient ones come for me, like to consort with me, I don't know where I end and where they begin, and I have to withdraw myself from the world and from everybody until the storm passes. Leonard Nimoy was a Vulcan for a life after filming Star Trek. That's interesting.
I
So
mean, I could see it.
he retained that identity. And see, there is another aspect to like creating any sort of art. I mean, you know my personal beliefs. A lot of this is recreating past life memories, which can be channeled like a collective past. Like they just like tap into what Carl Gustav Jung calls the collective subconscious, and you know they can bring up these vivid depictions of history, which then match, you know, records which are discovered, or people's memories recovered in vision. So a lot of people say that these like stories, it's fiction, that it's actually records of like actual histories, ancient Star Wars and stuff. And I mentioned here like the roles that I played. I mean, I'm no actress, but like being Morana, the goddess of Death Garden, it was actually one of the elements of my past life recovery workshop. Great question that can yield like tremendous gnosis for some people. Think about the roles that you played, the roles that you were given, theatric ones, that you were cast for, and the costumes that you wore, like for basketball. Because I bet you all of them were some kind of reminiscence of who you were. And I believe I told her here the story of how my parents, when I was 11 years old, they made this costume for me of this like super scary black magician warlock. And they did it so well that I felt so powerful in it. And it was a male costume. They did not dress me as a witch, it was a male costume. And nobody even wanted to walk near me. Like, it did something. Even at a collective level, it brought up some sinister memory. It was as if they wanted to do this to me so that much later in life I would recall it and I'm like, oh my god, like I was a black magician. This is who I am. This is how I radiate towards other people. My other costume, I tried the usual like a gypsy fortune teller, but it never fit me quite right. So I started creating things like, like a vampire duchess or queen of darkness. It was all like super dark, super sinister. And I also ended up wearing white lace at several events. I was like the angel accompanying Saint Nicholas, which is like the Czech Santa Claus, that he goes caroling at around December 6th. So he's the generous saint who gives get Krampus, the devil, who takes the bad kids into his sack, and he's got the angel on his other side who encourages the children into good behavior. But something about my angel was odd because I was barefoot. It was all very see-through. What it really looked like, and what I realize now what it actually was, I was no angel. I was like the corpse bride or side, or something happened to her because she was basically just in a nightgown, barefoot, insane, wandering around. So, that was another character, possibly of memory of some kind of suicide, something like that. Died as a virgin. So take a look into your own memories. Role playing, being a vampire at 5 and 8, and neighborhood kids were putting you in a coffin. There's a big probability that you were actual vampire, like at some point, because this is straight up bizarre.
See, what I remember is, as a kid, one costume I always wanted to do, but I was never happy with the kind of costume I was able to find for it, was just a skeleton. I would have been happy to just walk around as this skeletal being, spooking people.
I mean, look at your background, like, you're about that Saturnian current. Skeleton.
Yeah, and as I've said before, probably echoes of my past lives show up more in my role-playing characters than they ever have on a stage production, but that's that.
And also, let's not forget like live action role playing, where you create characters and stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop games, games where you enact a hero, or even characters that really, catch you, like they speak to your heart when you come across them in movies. I had to stop playing one game because it was getting to me too much. Like I chose two characters. He was like a former assassin, contract killer, and she was a psychic, haunted by her visions since childhood. And then when you make them interact a lot, they start falling in love with each other. And at one point I'm like, fuck this. I can't do this anymore. Like I'm getting emotionally invested in this game, in these characters. Like I'm seeing all of my exes some sort. I can't do this anymore because it's too real.
Yeah, like there was one instance I remember that was sort of like too trippy, and I didn't realize until like only a few years ago why. This character I was playing was a tiefling, which is like a half devil in the game, and it was a warlock, so calling dark powers dark. But the scene he was in is the holy the holy church of the area condemned him and was trying to sentence him and kill him, and then I was having like almost an anxiety attack from just seeing all that play out. And now that I understand that a big part of my past lives was knowing the quote unquote forbidden and being chastised and probably even executed for it, it's like, whoa, okay, get it now, but okay.
Did it help you to relive it, or did you try to change basically your destiny by reliving those events in the game?
As I said, it caused anxiety at the time. Looking back, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, there was probably a subconscious worry that I would replay that life in this one, even though in our culture, just killing somebody because they believe something different isn't really a thing.
Yeah, but we have to remind ourselves, right? Because when that fear, when that subconscious pattern kicks in, it can be very convincing, it can be very intense. And that's what we do with people in the past life therapy, like just bringing them into awareness that it's like gone, like you're not persecuted anymore, like you're not being tortured, you're not being executed. You can let that go, you can accept them, you can forgive those people. And I mean, it's all gore. It's very infamously known for bringing up these sorts of memories rather than like playing happy in the field. Sometimes people get happy memories, like flashes of them, usually like when you're in love or with a close friend, but it's mostly known for the gore. And I always am guilty for like forcing people to go through that, because it's not pretty stuff, and I always try to be comforting to them. I always try to tell them, look, like, times have changed, the society was different, we had different morals, the value of human life and the measure of violence was different. So somebody was burnt at stake. One of my recent, like, I had to tell her to explain her, but she knew basically. It's just a very weird conversation to have about that being a merciful method of execution actually back then. I mean, much preferable to being impaled.
Well, yeah, in fact, there's some famous stories of hangings in the Wild West where if you slip some money to the executioner, he'd put the knot to the side instead of the back, because from the back it's strangulation, but if it gets it at the right spot at the side and you drop, it snaps your neck. You don't feel a thing.
Yeah, sure. No, that's death has been always preferable to a prolonged one, you know. And she was my client was burned at stake for some kind of treason, which was actually a death that was reserved to like the royal servants and those who served the military. You know, everyone else was just impaled because it was the court of Vlad the Impaler. So, you know, it was to die because fire was seen as the element that purifies basically from sin, you know, hence burning the heretics and later on burning the books or even burning buildings. It's just a very deep rooted
And
belief.
the worst part of the impaling is most people think, all right, it's like you're sticking a spear through someone, then you're propping it up. No, the method they used at the time of Vlad was much, much worse in that they stuck the spear through, you know, your bottom end, and then they just left you up there, and basically you slowly slid down, and then the pole would just work its way through your body slowly. It would take days before it would even hit anything vital enough to kill you.
Yeah, you know,
So it's
being burned at stake is preferable, I guess.
mm-hmm.
Man, and that's, you know, and that's exactly like times have changed. And other forms of death were also traditionally used for sacrificing people to certain deities, certain elements. So, like hanging would be sacrificed to Odin or Tyr. They would often hang the sacrifices, human and animal, on the ancient trees. This is actually the reason why the Christians then cut down those ancient groves. It was not because they hated trees and they were like anti nature religion. It was big ancient tree with all the corpses hanging from it. They couldn't stomach it, so they just cut it down. That's how the ancient groves actually looked like, in case you didn't know. That's not really how we imagine them or how they are depicted, but I've seen it, even some artistic impressions of this. Definitely seen the memories. And then drowning, of course, would send the people, so God and I, Satan's water aspect. I believe Julius Caesar describes some of these customs in his dubious war propaganda memoirs, but they were elements of truth in it. It was just presented as a part of war propaganda, so that when the people back in Rome would read it, they would be like, "Oh my God, these barbarians! We totally
Yeah,
have
actually,
to
with that,
bring them the light."
the best way you can actually learn the more truthful thing is you learn what the Romans syncretized versus what they said. Because that's what they want. They wanted to syncretize this conquered area with them, so everybody just meshes a lot easier. What's that process called? Interpretio Romana, I think they call it.
And this is okay. Let's. I want to pull this. So here, ethic of our soon to be last show, Hexmas. Oh my God, the hellhounds are barking. The Christmas tree originally would have the enemies hung on it as a way to start the new year. I believe that. So, watch out for this final hour. Xmas, this 9 a.m. Pacific. I'll go on for like 3 hours. We'll have some festivities. a lot of great songs, and hopefully some guests will show up. Melvin said that he would make it, so let's celebrate Christmas together this year. I won't be hanging any enemies or sacrifices from the Christmas tree, but yeah, I wanted to like don't get it like what our pagan ancestors actually did. Happy New Year, and
Well,
we'll come
I
back.
know at least one or two black magicians who, during the Christmas time, they would call it the hexing tree because they would just hang pictures of people they wanted to curse. And
Oh,
then,
hexing tree. That's
I think it was,
You have to make the dogs shut up, or I'll have to put you on mute. So yeah, Hexmas, man, I have not seen that. Like I thought it was just a funny bumper sticker that I saw somewhere, but some people practice this. Burning a wreath of the sun wheel. Oh my god, that's pagan as fuck. And pagans call the season Yule, which I mean, but you know, wheel, it's not just like the wheel of the year, like the sun symbol. Pretty things, pretty pagan decor. It has a lot of sinister meanings uh, in it. Sacrifices of boar were also traditional. Wild boar, symbol of prosperity. Actually, where I come from, and this is like a later Christianized version of the custom, if the king and all the fasting, they would see a golden boar in the Christmas tree. I don't know why, but like seeing a golden boar was considered like the sign of prosperity and blessing. And it's so unchristian. And yet, you know, this folklore has been around till this day. So you'll see the golden boar. And the 12 days or nights of Christmas, a time of darkness, revelry, masquerades, costumes, hauntings, a time of chaos. So we'll go over that later this season for sure. And I will have Timothy Foster, my witch brother, on the 26th in the afternoon to talk about Samhain, Halloween, the witchy season. So we'll teach you some insights that you may have not heard of.
yeah, there's actually a funny synchronicity with Halloween because that was the day of the year that we moved into our current home.
Really?
Yes, we signed the paperwork and started moving on Halloween 3 years ago. And that was a Halloween that snowed. Like half the things we were supposed to do got wrong or delayed. But I like to think that was me paying the toll for crossing that threshold.
Yeah, man, like when you get a synchronicity of one of these old pagan holidays and another celestial event, that's when things get really crazy, like full moon on Halloween. The sacred cauldron is definitely a beautiful thing to have among your ritual tools. It's a symbol of the dark goddess, so it can be used for all kinds of transmutation, even baneful work, healing, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I have a cauldron, but I used it rather different. I would fill it with sea salt and saturate it with like rubbing alcohol, and that served as like my central anchoring fire of my altar for years.
So, do you burn it? Do you use it as a burning vessel?
Um, yeah. When I would use it, I would, yeah, it was the central fire that anchored my altar. It worked better than a candle because a candle is like this little spindly flame, but this was like an active, billowing flame coming out of the cauldron.
I mean, I remember because me and you studied Druidry, under ADF, Andriochthvein, which is a church registered as a Druid fellowship here in the US. And they practice the traditional Indo-European pagan cult. So our rituals were rituals of offerings, sacrifices, basically, to numerous spirits. The blessing from it. And in the build-up of the ritual, we would be opening the gates, always by calling a threshold deity. And the ritual circle had 3 elements in it. As far as I remember, it was the fire.
There was the fire, the pit.
No, the tree.
Yeah, there was the fire, the tree, and then like a pit, I think. Yeah, that sounds right.
I think it was water, fire, and tree, but the pit would definitely, that would be a connection to the underworld, like a sacrificial pit. We would often be pouring the offerings into the ground. But I think the cosmological elements were the tree, the sacred pole, which you see in voodoo rituals as well, the potomitan, the pole connecting. Looks like a stripping pole, honestly. It's usually decorated, but it's the world tree, actually.
Yeah, I remember my grove, it was basically just an upturned
Connecting
broom.
Two gates that open the path into other realms, which is water and fire, preferably in their natural form.
So, if I remember right, it was actually 3. The fire was the gate to the shining ones, which are like the what is it? The etheric Uranian celestial entities come through. There was the pit or the bowl being to the deep ones, which is like a collective term for the undead or the ancestors and the chthonic entities. And then you hallowed the representation of the tree as the portal to open for like land spirits and fae.
And we would also be appeasing the unnamed ones, the spirits which are not welcome in the ritual. We would be appeasing them behind the perimeter of the ritual circle, which I thought was like a really nice custom.
Yeah, you always you always put your offering like in the corner of the room you're in, away from where the ritual was. But yeah, there was an active offering. I forget what they called them, like outsiders or interlopers or something.
Outsiders, outsiders, something like that. Something fairly benign.
Yeah, so it's
I call them the lords of opposition.
So yeah, it's like I give you this offering and you leave my ritual alone was basically the idea.
Yeah, that was basically the idea, because it was like a white call in black magicians in the Druidry, and it was, well, when we talk about sacrifices, you could not bring in as much as a mouse or a rabbit there. Blood sacrifice in ADF, the church, was strictly forbidden, I think even in the church bylaws, just because people are so afraid of drawing the wrath of the Christians and explain away of like, oh, Druidry has changed a lot over the past few thousand years. I think that even like a drop of your own blood would be forbidden in the public ritual. But some of the clergy, they did it privately. And it was still like super controversial. So a lot of people who call themselves heathen, who like profess to follow, a more original private veganism, they laugh at this because that they're gonna hunt down animals and prepare them for dinner, which is actually still done in Haitian Boudon, and they will not bat an eye over this. But most of us were people from the city, so we were far removed from the farmlands. There is definitely water underneath the Bosnian Atlantic. It's like 30,000 years old, and they don't want to acknowledge this finding because it would disrupt history. Eternal waters. See, we called it the waters of life, and it was basically a form of communion. There would always be imbibing the sacred fluid in the Druidic ritual, which was blessed. Many people had issues with alcohol, but actually alcohol works better than water because alcohol contains spirit.
And it's lets you shake off some inhibition, so it assists in that. What is that called? Suspending disbelief.
Oh, you're talking about something else. You're talking about, I guess, with these allegories. Sexual fluids or cerebrospinal fluid, blood, perhaps. Northern Europeans, I mean, I'm not from Northern Europe, more like Central Eastern, and we still practice this as children. We would go to the woods, and this was highly illegal. We would be stealing, basically, but that made it more fun. It made it more fun than buying it in the street. And yes, burning the Christmas tree is like a big custom that ends the whole Christmas season. That's when the tree is dead and almost.
See, what's funny about that is we have a fake Christmas tree at our house, and our tradition is we put it up with the first snow, and then we normally take it down when we reasonably think it's not going to snow anymore, or like the spring equinox, whichever comes first. Because to us, it's like the lights and the joy and whatnot. That's to remind you that, this is Earth being.
Latvians were the last people to be Christianized in like 1600s, I kid you not. That's when Christianity came to Latvia. It was the last pagan place in Europe. But honestly, I don't know what they are like nowadays. I know that they have their own like pagan reconstructionist nationalist groups, and they don't like foreigners. They don't really like to share their stuff. I'm not very familiar with what they do up there. I keep the tree thriving all year. Oh, absolutely. That's what you do with the tree of life, which is reflected in you. in all of us. Some people actually think that it's like morbid, to have the wither like non-ecological, and so they will get a plastic one for the reason of like not killing it, not defiling nature.
See, we just have a fake one because I know we could not keep up with watering a real one. Well, our problem is dogs, but yeah.
What about the occult inspiration in pop culture? Circling back to our original topic, I believe you wanted to say something about Tolkien and Star Wars and stuff like that, so the floor is yours.
Okay, so let's start with Tolkien because that's the one I find particularly fascinating, is that a lot of people examining Tolkien's works and little notes he gave through his various letters to people, Sauron he viewed as the pinnacle of someone realizing the Nietzschean paradigm, the Übermensch. And he, so basically it's just a giant allegory for where amoral, a-religious, alpha-type personality will take us as a people. But the interesting thing is that when you read Tolkien's work more completely, Sauron isn't one to like to destroy things. He is not a destroyer by nature. He views it as mortals were given the chance to provide order and harmony and peace in the world, and they failed. So it is now his job to do it for them. So Sauron honestly believes he's the hero. He's the only one who can lead the world properly. But then it goes again back to Nietzsche, and if I'm going to be blunt and honest, about half of satanic Luciferian stuff today is just mystified Nietzsche. So, and then I personally like, in fact, even my Discord name is Sauron. I like identifying with it because in any story he's at, he isn't just a being, he is a presence.
Oh yeah, I remember those words. He's described as a presence.
And the thing is the other thing about Sauron is everybody thinks, oh, he's just evil conquering. One of his epitaphs was the Lord of Gifts. He knew how to satisfy people, how to bring people to his own camp, how to charm people, how to subtly slip words and phrases into their minds so they see things more along his route.
The Lord of Gifts, that's fascinating.
Yes, because the pinnacle of that concept is the rings themselves, because he gave rings to all these people, and they were genuine gifts, like here, but there was a string attached.
There is always a string attached.
That's why if I ever get a tattoo, one of the tattoos I want to get is the verse about the rings. So yeah, that's my little bit about Sauron and why I like him as a character. And if I'm going to be honest, he's like a distilled version of like my shadow, the part of myself I don't want to admit is there, but it's that will to be generous, but there's a string attached. Be controlling, but not destructive. That kind of thing.
So he's a Luciferic figure.
Very much. That's why I find it funny that the actual movies literalized the Eye of Sauron as this big flaming eye in a tower, when in the stories it's more like he was still in his physical form. He was not a flaming eye. But the eye being his mark, his sigil, was everywhere. Wherever his forces were, you would find the eye there, and you found the eye everywhere.
So he
There's-
liked to do the copy.
Like to do the what? Sorry, cut out.
In the Volsunga saga, Fafnir tells Sigurd that the ring and the treasure will kill him, and he says men want power and wealth. He was very generous. Yes, that's the Old Norse law. Too bad I don't have anybody who could like come on and tell us more about it. I am not like a super deep Norse scholar, but there's some fantastic material out there. But what I do know is what Brandon just mentioned, that the Gibor or an X, it is actually said to represent a kiss, which is an exchange between two people, or a gift, an equal exchange.
Mm-hmm.
The Nordic, they had a saying that gift calls for a gift, and this was often referenced among the druids when I was with them, that like we give these gifts to the gods to invite them to give back to us. Like we don't do it just, to keep the cult up, the expectation that it will be rewarded. And yes, it does not signify just a kiss, but also sexual magic is said to be encoded in this rune.
And interesting that you bring up Norse mythology, in that this is where Tolkien actually coded some Norse into his mythology. Gandalf and Sauron are meant to be like the two sides of the coin that is Odin.
Oh, absolutely. I could see that because they are both magicians. One is like a white magician, the other one is like a warlock, but Odin is both, Odin totally has a black magical side.
Well, yeah, because think about it. One of Odin's names is the Grey Wanderer. He wanders, sharing wisdom and being sometimes kind and generous to those who treat him well. But when you draw his ire, he is like Sauron. His presence is there. It is subtle, and you will feel it.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that Odin himself broke a lot of ethical codes to evolve consciousness. Brandon had an interesting vision that the icy water and was trying to make him jump in. That's a very ordeal-like initiatic scenery. Kind of reminds me of my own process of wintering with Lady Morana. Jumping into icy water, it's just like one of those things that you don't want to do. And yet there is people challenging themselves to do this, those clubs of crazy people who
The
will
polar
go
bear plunge. Yep, it's called the polar bear plunge.
in the water every spring, naked there, and they get the newspapers, and they've been doing this for 100 years, and it's like a badge of honor for them to do this. So like stuff like this can be done.
It's just ancient encoding of that need to pass through an ordeal.
Yeah. So Belial, I could see him as the one, like all the infernals will push you in. I could totally see him. doing that. And you know what they say? You know, sometimes you need to be thrown into the water and then you start swimming. Or you need to jump into the pool. Just try entering the pool gradually. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes you just don't want to get your balls or your pussy cold because
Yeah, that's the difference between my wife and I whenever we go swimming, because, you know, in summer, the pool's always going to be cold. Yeah, the pool's always going to be cold in summer when you first jump in. I'm the kind, I'm going to go to the deep end, and I'm just going to jump, and I'm going to get it over with. My wife has to go inch by inch by inch deeper.
and you only learn about the ethics by exploring their far end, which is what the witch father did. Could be classified as child abuse these days. So when Belial showed him this vision, Brandon says he looked like a pissed off dad, demanding that he does it, that he goes into the icy water. Swim or drown.
Well, that could be an ordeal, or that could simply be him pushing him to conquer aversion. I don't want to do this. No, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, there's like legit traditional health therapies that are practiced in spas where they like alternate hot and cold water, and it actually does something to the body. There is even like ice therapy where you enter into freezing box. Apparently does something to, so you never know. You never know.
Yeah, in fact, there's a therapy you can get in LA somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. It's called cryotherapy. You stand in like this vertical tube thing in like basically like bathing shorts. And then they crank the temperature just in the tube down to like negative 75 degrees Fahrenheit for like 10 minutes. It's supposed to rejuvenate you or some other thing. I forget. Sounds a little too woo-woo for me, but that's just me.
But see, Belial is just trying to do the good for you. You don't have to go to LA to pay for these, freaky therapy fads. You can do it for free on the left-hand path.
Although there's also something to be said, because normally with those ordeals, normally in those times, the community, after you're done with your ordeal, would help you on your path to recovery. They would embrace you. So it's not just like this individual ordeal you conquer, it's also reconnecting to your community from this, I guess you call it elevated state.
Absolutely. What point did you want to make about Star Wars when you mentioned it to me?
That one's very interesting because I think George Lucas is on tape saying he based the Sith, the bad guys, on his readings of the Satanic Bible.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I think he even read some Nietzsche and the Satanic Bible to come up with the core of what the quote-unquote Sith are. What I find interesting about those is the Sith, the bad guys, how they experience the dark side, and everything is pain and ambition. Those are the two things that drive you to the greatest heights, and you're great as an individual.
That sounds very magical.
But the problem is the Sith don't check those things, so they ultimately destroy themselves. The Jedi, on the other hand, they're all about compassion, interconnectedness, almost non-interference. And while that sounds good to some people from the white magic right-hand path end of things, it basically forced them to stagnate and destroy themselves from within just by not developing, not willing to go the furthest extent.
I have come across like actual black magicians online who are quoting the creeds of the Sith. So there is definitely like a backflow shared by actual black magicians, or if it embodies like a brotherhood that once existed in the outer space. Some seem to be recognizing it and even identifying as being the Sith.
Oh yeah, there's a famous mantra of the Sith that I remember in particular. It was when I was working in a factory and you had to get a certain rate. If I was lagging behind, I would repeat their little code as like a mantra, and I did notice, man, I could hit them damn numbers when I was doing it. Because it is very empowering. Trying to remember what it is.
So the Sith magic worked for you.
Mm-hmm.
See? Yeah. Iberman Rising. And we're back into Nietzsche because, like Frater said, like the modern left-hand path philosophies, all of it, the entire center. Like we do consider ourselves to be striving for something else, something more than the ordinary man, godhead, apotheosis, becoming like gods. And Ayn Rand, possibly, but I'm not very familiar with her work. Atlas Shrugged.
I am far more. I'm somewhat familiar with Ayn Rand. Hers, what Ayn Rand had, how Ayn Rand relates to Nietzsche is she started a publication known as The Objectivist, which is, pioneered objectivism. There's just this default way the world works, and we view things from a flawed subjective lens, all that stuff. But one of the things she put forth in it that flows very well with Nietzsche is this idea that everything we do has a selfish element to it. No matter
Yeah.
what it is, you're going to
Very,
get...
very unchristian thought, right? Because the Christians are all about being selfless, alleged unconditional love, self-sacrifice, and martyrdom. Loving thy neighbor.
But if I remember right, she took it that extra step where, while everything is selfish, ultimately, if you inject some reciprocity in it so that you're not the only one that benefits, normally that gives you a greater return than on just entirely self-aggrandizing, self-centered ways of doing things. In fact, I think one example she said of this whole mindset is even the martyr who dies for a cause dies for his legacy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he dies for the eternal rewards, in pretty literal about it.
Whereas this more wholesome way, well, I wouldn't say wholesome, but this more well-rounded way of viewing it is, if I help somebody, I'm getting something out of it regardless. But me allowing another to experience some benefit from it is normally of benefit to not just me, to the society I'm a part of, and I'm going to get a return flow from that. Now, that's an extremely simplistic way of putting it, but that's kind of the core idea.
So basically, what we think of as unconditional love is an illusion.
Basically, yeah. We do get something out of it, but there is always an exchange between the individual and the community. And mastering it by saying, everything I do for myself, but does it have to be only for myself?
Or, as Brandon says, love unto those who deserve it rather than waste it on ingrates. Is that a quote from the 11 Satanic Principles, I believe?
It could be, but it doesn't sound familiar.
Or, as Misfit puts it, I don't love you.
Well, that's just it. People say, I love you. When they say I love you, what they're really saying is, I love the person I am when I'm around you.
Oh God. I mean, and then, then there's just like, what is it even? Is it like feelings, hormones, words?
See, the problem is
Should be deeds, at least, very fleeting.
the problem is the modern Western definition of love. It's very loose and all-encompassing. There's like so many things that people wrap up into it. Infatuation, connection, cohabitation.
It did not even appear in the marriage contracts until like the late 1800s. Because people did not see that institute like personal fulfillment. It was the contrary. It was like the opposition of romantic fulfillment. Like romantic love is what you experience in secret or, platonically, that which you can't have, the forbidden. It has changed in very significant ways the cultural perception of it.
That's why, apparently, I don't remember them all, but there's like, I think 6 or 7 versions of love according to the Greeks, and I loved it.
Yes, agape, eros, philia. They literally had like 6 or 7 words, which all mean love, but they carry a different connotation to it.
Yeah, like there was like infatuation, sexual attraction, emotional compatibility, uh, comfortable, like cohabitative love, and there were a couple others. I don't remember what they are. But that's so much better than just love. Well, what does that mean? What does the word love without any?
Dude, like, don't ask me, because I have loved many, and they all made me suffer or failed me in different ways. And I mean, I was loved by many, for certain, and there's still men out there who would kill for me. But does it even mean, like, anything beyond the story that happened? No. I once had this mystical vision. I actually had it times in my life. I think it usually followed a breakup, where I saw this like a psychedelic view of my reality, where I am this organism, this flower, and I'm just connected to other organisms, other flowers, and we are all like pulsing or beaming this pattern. And like that was all that was there to it. It was simply the existence of this connection between the souls. And it was an entire tapestry, it was like a pattern. It was definitely not a magnetism between just two poles. Like we were all a part of this tapestry. And there is, of course, the thelemic love is the law, love under will. Meaning will with a capital W, the true will, which is basically following your dharma, following your... Did it feel good when you were experiencing that vision? It felt familiar, old, and like I was remembering something that was so obvious. Like when I had that vision both times, it was in my 20s. I was like, yeah, oh my god, that's what it is. Like we're just these like flowers who are interconnected, all pulsing with life. Like I saw the greater picture. It no longer mattered, that some particular relationship ended, because I saw the full picture. And sometimes I would also be experiencing deja vu at around the same time. Like I would I would realize that I had seen this ending in a dream or in my mind before. Realization that it was like inevitable. And the vision was actually very contrary to the idea of ending, of cutting cords. The person just left my life, but I saw the cords and how we are all connected, intertwined, and like always will be in this timeless space. So it was healing, I would say. It was it took away the pain. About being compassionless, love under law, love under will. That's kind of something that I have. It's a part of these initiations that I've brought upon myself, because Morana in the Heart of Winter, she, as all the death gods, she is but more as in compassion. She's unmoved by the human passions because the job needs to be done. It's very refreshing perspective, communing with the death goddess, because she and Lucifer the Grim Reaper as well, they both came to me like last days, and they're like, oh, it's so beautiful, like you're dying to so many things, you have died to so many things, and we are here for the death process. So, strange, but the death goddess, she just loves that. That's her role in nature.
And that, funnily enough, rounds about back to Star Wars for a little bit, because I believe there's a certain part in some of the fiction where there was a sect of the Sith that believed that they were the culling people. They were the ones who culled things so that new life may flourish. They were the death to the Jedi's life, and as such, they preserve a balance in which they prosper from.
I was told this, and I believe we mentioned it with James Henshaw, that we are the executioners. We are the left hand of God, the culling harvest, an occult left hand path concept, which it would be lovely if we could elaborate like on the ONA stuff here at some point, but I don't really know if there's anyone familiar with it enough and willing to speak. Like this channel is ending soon, so I'm no longer worried about saying controversial things. I lose subscribers every time I air an episode because I say something. somebody doesn't like. I will be back as soon as tomorrow with urban shamanism, talking about practicing the craft in the concrete jungle of the city, working with city egregore, parking lot magic, stuff like that.
And I personally believe there's a shamanic power in the liminal spaces you can often find in urban settings.
Oh, absolutely. Like come on, the city is just as magical as the countryside. It's just a bit different. It's got its own witchiness. We'll talk about the season with Timothy Foster. I also want to speak about ultraviolence, or dealing with the dark impulse as a black magician. I have some more things to say about the dark spirits of Voodoo. James Henshaw will be back in November to talk about noblesse oblige for both spirits and human. And the final hour is set to go. Join us for Heckmas. I want to get on a few other people. We'll see what topics. I got some cool music, and we shall dance with the devil until there's no songs left.
That reminded me of one pop culture reference that I love, even though it means nothing. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
And more in complete darkness.
Yeah, that line is actually from Jack Nicholson's Joker in the original Batman movie. What I love is he himself said, "Oh, it doesn't mean anything. I just like the sound of it."
They always say that it doesn't mean anything, but we know better, right? We can read between the lines.
Well, even if it means nothing, it's like chaos magic. It's, it sounds forbidden, it sounds spooky. He normally says it to someone he's about to kill, so it's a subtle threat.
Oh, it could be anything. It's a spell. It's a conjuration. The word that is spoken or imagery that is painted that's an act of magic. Whether it's lyrics from Deep Purple or Black Sabbath or anything like that. Might do an episode about the magical dimension of music and movies. We'll see. We'll see what inspiration comes. I will let you go for today with Thor, my favorite sexy hero.
I see a red door. I want it painted black. No colors anymore. I want them to turn black. I see the girls walk by dressed in their summer clothes. I have to turn my head until my darkness goes.